Welcome to The Explainer. You ever wonder why your company makes you take that security training every single year? Or why you can't just plug any old USB stick you find into your work computer? Well, it all boils down to this thing called IT risk management. And yeah, it sounds like something just for the tech department, but today we're going to show you why it's really about protecting the very heart of the business and how you are a critical part of that defense. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at IT risk as a core business challenge, not just a tech problem. Then we'll break down the three key ingredients that make up any risk. After that, we'll explore how companies decide just how much risk they're willing to take on, check out the official playbooks they use, and get into the nitty-gritty with the main tool for tracking it all, the risk register. And we'll wrap up by talking about why this is a conversation that really never ends.
All right, let's dive right in. The biggest mistake people make with IT risk is thinking it's some technical thing that the IT team will just handle. But the truth is, it's a fundamental business issue. Getting this wrong isn't just a problem, it can be a company-ending event.
Before we get into all the techie stuff like firewalls and encryption, let's just pause for a second. Let's ask a much more basic question. Forget technology for a minute. If you owned a business, what would you be terrified of losing? What are those absolute worst-case scenarios that keep you up at night?
You're probably thinking about stuff just like this, right? A fire, theft, your supply chain breaking down. But here's where the physical and digital worlds completely crash into each other. That broken supply chain, that could be a ransomware attack on one of your partners. That skull and crossbones on the screen, that's not just a computer problem, that's data corruption that could bring your entire operation to a grinding halt. Every single one of these classic business nightmares now has a digital component. They're all tangled up in technology.
And that leads us straight to the official definition, which really makes this connection obvious. See, IT risk isn't some separate thing. It is business risk. It's just the business risk that happens to involve technology. It's about the potential for loss that comes with every single piece of tech a company uses. This isn't just about cybersecurity, it's about survival.
Okay, so to manage something this big, everybody needs to be on the same page, speaking the same language. So let's break down the recipe for risk. There are really only three core ingredients that have to come together for anything bad to happen. First up, ingredient number one, your assets. An asset is just anything your company values, anything that's worth protecting. It's the treasure that you're trying to keep safe.
And this is so important to remember. We're talking about way more than just laptops and servers. As you can see here, some of the most valuable assets are things you can't even touch, right? Your company's reputation, your secret formula, or just the amazing knowledge inside a key employee's head. All of these are absolutely critical assets. Okay, our second ingredient is the threat. A threat is basically any event or any force that could possibly harm your assets. You can think of it like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. And the key thing here is that threats, just like the weather, are usually outside of your direct control. And as you can see, threats can come from just about anywhere. They can be malicious, like a hacker trying to steal your data. They can be totally accidental, like a software bug or a sudden power outage. Or, it could be Mother Nature, like a flood or a big storm. These are all the potential dangers just waiting out there.
And that brings us to our final crucial ingredient, the vulnerability. So if the threat is the storm cloud outside, the vulnerability is the hole in your roof. It's the weakness, the gap, the unlocked door that a threat can use to actually get in and cause damage. And here's the huge difference. Unlike threats, vulnerabilities are almost always things you can control and fix.
Vulnerabilities are usually our own internal weak spots. It might be an employee who accidentally clicks on a phishing email, a computer that's missing a security update, or just a clunky, outdated process. These are the little cracks in our digital armor that let a threat become a real big problem. So now we've got our three ingredients: assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. The big question is, what do organizations actually do about them? I mean, you can't eliminate all risk. That's impossible. You'd go bankrupt trying. So instead, they have to make a really important strategic decision. How much risk are we willing to live with to get where we want to go? And this is what's known as defining your risk appetite. Now, this brings up two ideas that are related, but they're definitely not the same thing. First, you've got risk appetite. Think of that as the big picture target on the left. It's a high-level statement about how much risk you're generally comfortable with. Then you've got risk tolerance. That's the ruler on the right. It gets really specific and puts actual measurable numbers on that appetite. Let's unpack that a bit more. Let's use an analogy.
Imagine the beaker represents all the risk a company could possibly handle. The very, very top of that beaker, that's its risk capacity. This is the absolute limit. It's the maximum amount of risk it can take on before the whole thing fails. It's the point where the beaker overflows. Now, obviously, you don't want to operate right there at the brim, right? That's just asking for trouble. So the company's leaders make a strategic choice. They decide on a fill-to line somewhere below the top. And that line, that is the risk appetite. It's a conscious decision. For a fast-growing startup, that line might be pretty high. They need to take risks to innovate. But for, say, a hospital, that line is going to be incredibly low for anything involving patient safety.
And finally, risk tolerance is where the rubber meets the road. It makes that appetite measurable. It defines the acceptable wiggles around that line. So for example, the appetite might be, we must have highly reliable websites. The tolerance then says, okay, that means the website can't be down for more than 4 hours a quarter. It's the specific, hard number that tells you if you're getting too close to your limit.
Okay, so you've defined your appetite, you know your tolerance, you've got a strategy. But how do you actually get everyone in a big organization to play by the same rules? Well, you need a playbook. And in the world of IT risk, these playbooks are called frameworks. A really popular one is the NIST cybersecurity framework you see here, and it breaks the whole process into a continuous loop. It starts with govern, that's setting the strategy we just talked about. Then you identify your assets and your risks. Next, you protect them with things like firewalls and training. But because nothing is ever perfect, you also have to be able to detect when something bad happens. When it does, you need a plan to respond right away. And finally, you have a plan to recover and get back to business. And notice the arrows. This is not a one-and-done checklist. It's a constant living cycle. All right, so we've got assets, threats, vulnerabilities, a risk appetite, a framework. That is a lot of moving parts. So how in the world does a company keep track of all this stuff in one central place? The answer is this thing right here, the risk register. You should think of this as the central nervous system for all things risk. It is the single source of truth for every single known risk in the company. And it's not some dusty spreadsheet that sits on a shelf. It's a living document, a database that's being updated all the time. Now, a risk register can look kind of intimidating, but as you can see, it really just boils down to answering 3 essential questions for every risk. First, what exactly is the risk? Second, how bad would it be if it happened? What's the impact? And third, and this is probably the most important part, who is the risk owner? That last column is a total game changer because it turns risk from this vague, fuzzy company problem into one specific person's responsibility.
And all of this, the frameworks, the registers, all of it, leads us to our final and maybe most important point. Managing risk is not a project you finish. There is no done. It is a continuous conversation, a permanent part of doing business. And it absolutely has to be a collaborative process. I mean, the IT team can't possibly know all the risks on their own. The real experts are the people actually doing the work. The finance person who knows the payment systems inside and out, the HR team that handles all the sensitive data, the engineer on the factory floor. You need their insights to see the whole picture. So, the ultimate takeaway here is that IT risk management isn't just IT's job, it's everyone's job. From the CEO setting that high-level risk appetite, all the way down to the newest intern learning how to spot a phishing email. Every single person is a part of that digital shield. And that brings us to our final question for you. Your organization has a risk plan. Do you know your part?